years old. And she always said how happy they were to have me. And you can see I was happy because I was pretty fat, actually.
This is a picture, the earliest picture we have of my childhood. My brother Tom is on the right, and I'm on the left, and my little sister Mary is behind. And the important part of this family is a calf, this cow here, this little calf, who grew up to be Bonnie, the cow that I milked as I was growing up in Provo, Utah. Well, you can see what a beautiful girl she was. This is a high school picture, and I can't figure out how somebody as beautiful as she was would marry a guy that looked as wimpy as I look in that picture. Her graduation picture in college, you can see how beautiful she was. This is me in my infantry helmet, and you can look to see that in World War II, and you can see by the determined look on my face why we won that war.
That was our wedding day on July 15th, 1945. What a day that was. We had driven from Portland, stopped in Idaho to get a blood test because Wyoming had a 3-day waiting period, and we'd driven in a little one-seated car with Bill's parents, and his mother was not small, and walked in on my parents who had been camping, came home. We had to send them a telegram. They came home and walked in, and Bill said, "We want to get married," and my dad said, "You don't have a wedding certificate," and he pulled one out of his pocket. And they got busy and put on the very best wedding they could. And that was a picture we had taken before we went to Freedom, where we went over the line into Idaho to get married by a bishop down there. Then Bill went overseas not too long after that.
Toward the end of the war, I ended up in Hawaii, and when the war ended, I sent for Donna, and she came over on the first civilian ship that arrived in Hawaii.
As he said, I just arrived in Hawaii, and he met me with leis, and it was pretty exciting and pretty scary because we still didn't know each other very well.
And here's a picture of her arriving. She arrived with a sunburn and a cold, so I could hardly touch her after months of separation, but we had a wonderful time in Hawaii. And here we are, my graduation day from Reed College, and with our first baby, whose name was Billy. What a wonderful, wonderful day that was.
Billy doesn't look too happy. I don't think he realized the importance of his father's graduation that day, but we were proud of Bill and proud of Billy at the same time.
After college, directly out of college, I came to the Deseret News, and this is a picture of a promotion piece of the sports department of the Deseret News, and I'm the lower right-hand side and the greenest member of that staff.
When we were first married, we did not have a car, and we walked everywhere in Portland, and we moved to Salt Lake, and we did not have a car. But finally, I can't remember how, but we bought a little blue Studebaker, and that was it. That was our first car.
This is this fairly young married couple in front of our first house that we ever owned at 1643 Harrison Avenue in Salt Lake City. I was working at the Deseret News, and we were able to buy that house with every cent that we had and moved into it without a stick of furniture. But it was a wonderful time that we finally owned a house. Yeah, in 1950 at the MIA June Conference, Donna was the mistress of ceremonies at the Golden Gleaner banquet, which is a big deal.
This was really an interesting time for me because I was pregnant with Melinda. This was June Conference, the year she was born on August 4th. And as Bill said, I was to be mistress of ceremonies at the Golden Gleaner banquet. President George Albert Smith had been out of town. Eileen Dunyan and I met him at the train station, and we're offering him the opportunity to come and be the speaker at our banquet that day. He came graciously, and that day I had a real traumatic experience because we were decorating all morning, and I went to take somebody home in our little Studebaker and got hit by a cement truck as I was going through an intersection. of course, I could drive the car. I went home and I was all shaky. Walked in the house. First, my sister called to see if I was okay from Wyoming. Then Bill called. He had gotten up out of a meeting in the tabernacle. I had the feeling he should call me. He called, and when he heard what had happened, he came right home and gave me a blessing so I could go do my job. So that was a memorable time, and that Melinda enjoyed that experience too.
And at a general conference, MIA conference, that year, no, it would be the next year, you'll see me here, or maybe you won't recognize me. This is Joseph Smith in a pageant at the June conference. This is a picture of us with our first three children, Billy on the top, and then Melinda, and then Kristen, who was just a newborn at that, well, maybe 3 or 4 months old.
When we went to Canada with our children, we left Kristen in Afton with my mother, and she loved taking care of her. She was just 2 then. Tom was a baby. He had been born in June, and we took him with us. And if you can believe it, this picture was taken when he was asleep in the car. And we also rode the tram up and left him asleep in the car. I can't believe we would do that, but we did. I really hope he doesn't see this, because he'll think that he's been abused his whole life. And in some ways, he probably has.
In, I think, 1955, we held the first of what became many family reunions. This was at Aspen Grove, and the camp that we used had not been used since before the war. We had the job of cleaning out years and years of rat dung and cleaning up the place so we could hold this reunion. Melinda is at the lower right-hand corner. Kristen is on my mother's lap. Mother and Dad are in the middle. And Bill is the kid in the front row with the striped shirts. This is a picture of our second house that we ever owned, and the house that we lived in for 45 years. We moved there in 1956, and as I say, lived there for 45 years at 55 Laurel Street in the Federal Heights area of Salt Lake City. All of our kids were raised there, and it was a wonderful family home. This is a picture of the street, Perry Avenue, just in front of our house. Lovely residential neighborhood. This is a picture taken for a Christmas card, and it was the first picture I think that we had that included all of our children. Bill, you can see appearing in from the right-hand side. Melinda's standing behind me. Kristen is the one holding the package, and Tom is between Kristen and Melinda. And Lawrence is a little kid on his mother's lap. In 1958, the London Temple was dedicated, and we had the wonderful opportunity of going there for the dedication to cover it for the Deseret News. This picture is of an oak tree on the grounds of the temple, which was named the David O. McKay Oak because he ordered that they save it. And we took that picture, had his family tree, his family pictures mounted on it, and presented it to President McKay. That's Earl Hawks, who was then a publisher of the paper, who was there with me. In 1961, I had the wonderful experience of going to Antarctica, spending 3 weeks down there, including a trip up to the South Pole, where I walked around the Earth 3 times around the pole. This is a picture of an emperor penguin chick. And as a chick, it weighed about 40 pounds. They're big, and the birds themselves weigh up to 60, 80 pounds. The following year, I had the opportunity of touring all the countries of South America with Darrell Chase, who was the president of Utah State University. This was an interesting picture taken in the Altiplano of Bolivia. A woman was doing her laundry, spreading her clothes out to dry on the grass behind, and with a package of Fab sitting beside her. I thought that was a wonderful picture. I was made chairman of the Explorer Committee for the church, and one of the things we started was the International Explorer Conference. And in this picture, we're presenting a copy of the conference program to President McKay. And here's a picture of the crowd of that conference in the Marriott Center in BYU campus. In 1963 and 64, we were part of building the Federal Heights Ward Chapel. This picture shows Henry D. Moyle, who was a member of the ward, along with Governor Clyde and others. And this was a work party out building the chapel. And shortly after that chapel was built, I was made the bishop of the Federal Heights Ward, and this is my bishopric. Buzz Sandberg on the left, the first counselor, and Dan Bushnell on the right, second counselor, and the ward clerks behind. It's a wonderful experience. I was bishop for a little over 5 years, and one of the great experiences of my life. I was made a member of the first board of directors of the advisory board of United Press International, and one of our meetings was in London, and I told them I'd come only if I could have a chance to play at Wimbledon. And so here we are, the number of our editors posing in front of the clubhouse at Wimbledon, which was a great experience. Shortly after I was released as bishop, I was asked to lead a stake youth outing over the Pioneer Trail trek from Hennifer, 36 miles, the last 36 miles of the Pioneer Trail to Salt Lake Valley. And here's a picture of that wonderful group of young people with Brigham Young, who was actually Jim Clayton, posing in front of them. This is a picture of the entire extended family at the time of my father and mother's 50th anniversary in the chapel in Colonial Heights Chapel in Portland. We, with a group of about 10 of our friends, we bought 160 acres of land up on Red Creek in Duchesne County and built a lodge up there and fenced all that 160 acres, had our horses up there, and it was a great time. This is a picture where my two sons, Lawrence and Tom, had been working all day, and our great friend Paul Keller took this picture, which we think is a treasure. In the mid-1960s, I was involved with developing Sweetwater at Bear Lake, and we bought a condominium up there. And for every year since then, we've had family reunions at Bear Lake. This was a sailboat we bought back in those early days, a Hobie Cat, which probably has the oldest sail still sailing on Bear Lake or perhaps anywhere else.
That is the love of Bill's life. And whenever we've gone to Bear Lake, it's taken more time to put up that boat, a lot of times, than people could sail on it. And a lot of times they've sailed out on it and they've sat in calm water for hours before they could come back, or occasionally they've sailed out on it and tipped over in rough waters.
One of the things we've loved doing with our family is hiking, especially in the desert country, backpacking. And this is a picture of Stevens Arch in Stevens Canyon in the great Red Rock country of southern Utah. Obviously, Donna, as a school teacher, and can you imagine a more beautiful school teacher? In the mid-'80s, we had the great experience of trekking in the Himalayas, and here we are at the Annapurna Base Camp, and there was the Annapurna showing in the background.
The Sherpas did most of the work. We only carried little teeny backpacks. And before we got to Annapurna Base Camp, we passed by some places where there had been snowslides. It's not what you call it. Avalanches. So it was a little ticklish going over them, and you would come to a spot that was a little bit dangerous, and just out of nowhere, a Sherpa would appear on each side and would just sort of put a gentle hand on each elbow and take you through, and then they would disappear. So I've always thought service ought to be like that we ought to just sort of appear when we're needed and disappear without making a big deal about it.
And about the following year, I ran a marathon for the first time, the Deseret News Marathon. Here I am finishing, and here is what it did to my feet. This was an ordeal that I hope never to suffer again. I've run several marathons since then, but never one that was as difficult as that one.
His brother Tom was here when Bill ran that marathon, and he had to take a picture of his feet. I just think that's classic. You don't see very many pictures of feet like that.
This proves the fact that I did finish. Here I have a hug from our daughter Kristen with her husband Randy in the background. This is a picture taken near the top of Deseret Peak out in Tooele County. A hike we took with friends on a beautiful summer day.
I've been married to a man who has very strong feelings about one thing or another. He loves junipers. And we started, not right away, we've had some real experiences with Christmas trees. Like the first one we had was just a little one, and Billy was just not quite a year, and he ate the balls off the tree. We had to give him bread to soak up the little pieces that he ate. So we've had a lot of experiences with trees. We had one when a dog tipped it over, it got all decorated, and our dog tipped it over. And one year I made gingerbread men, and we had gingerbread men and candy canes, and we were going to give a gingerbread man and a candy cane to everybody who came to visit, and I got pneumonia and nobody could visit us. So it all got... So we have lots of trees, but the most memorable is this one. We started going out looking for trees, and we got conventional trees for a couple or 3 years, which I liked a lot. But then, for some reason, they decided to go looking for junipers, and I didn't go this year. And they came home with this crooked, twisted juniper that I just loved. I've never had a tree I've loved so much. Ever since then, we've gone looking for junipers, and we've never found a decent juniper since. This year, our juniper is very ugly, but it's a juniper, and Bill loves junipers, so I suppose we'll always have junipers, ugly or wonderful.
One of the things that I did as an editor was to organize the civic dialogue program on Channel 7, where I was the moderator. That program has lasted until this time. I think it's the longest running program that they've had. This is a picture of a program in which I was interviewing Secretary of State Dean Rusk. And this is another civic dialogue program with Senator Wallace Bennett on the left and Congressman David King on the right. And the year that President Carter was elected, I was invited with a group of editors to be the first editors to interview him in the White House. We had all day long with his staff and with him. Unfortunately, his presidency didn't turn out to be very, very successful, although he was personally, I thought, a great man. In the 1960s, I was chairman of the Provo Jordan River Parkway Foundation, and this was a fundraising event that we held. We had a buffalo barbecue, and including a buffalo that was taken from Antelope Island by courtesy of Governor Matheson, and Governor Matheson's the one in the middle about to throw a frisbee. In 1979, the Deseret News sponsored a relay race from Nauvoo to Salt Lake City, 10-mile segments. And I was privileged to run the first 10 miles of that relay. From Nauvoo, we crossed the river on a boat, and then we started running up the bluff, and that's a steep bluff coming up out of that river. But that 10-mile segment was a pretty difficult time. Well, this is a dramatic event where we were coming home from a conference in South America, and
well, I wanted to stay in Quito overnight, but he had to be back for his meeting or his talk. I don't remember which. And so when we got in Miami, we were really early, and we waited and waited and waited and got on the plane, and the plane took off, and everybody started looking worried. Well, first of all, there were really older attendants, and I made a very stupid comment to Bill. I said, I hope we don't get in trouble because this looks like the geriatric plane. And we took off, and people started going up and down the aisles with worried looks on their faces, and they didn't tell us anything. And then they'd come down, they'd go like this, the plane would go up and down. And finally, we found out that one of the landing gear would not retract. So one was down and one was up, and they couldn't make it work. And so we flew for 2 hours over the ocean, dropping gas and thinking about what it was going to be like to land. My husband, bless his heart, was taking notes the whole time, the eternal journalist. One of the women sitting by us was a Catholic, and she was using her prayer beads the whole time. And I was thinking about my family. I didn't think about my dirty house or anything else except what would they do without me. The next day, when our kids came down from Park City, our grandson Jed, who was just about 4 then, I think, his father said, I don't know what you were doing about 9 o'clock last night, but Jed said to us, Grandma's flying an airplane to heaven. And that was just the time that we were going through all of this. And then Randy said, I guess he realized he'd said something really crazy because he wouldn't say anymore. So that was an interesting experience. And one thing that Bill always tells that I don't know why he didn't tell this time is that there were several missionaries on the plane. And one of them said, after we crashed in Miami and went through all of the foam and everything that they spray on you, made me realize we should always be prepared for a crash landing.
On our 45th anniversary, we took all of our family, the adults and children as well, to Hawaii and had a wonderful time.
Hawaii was a very interesting experience for all of us that year because we had to bring people from sort of all around, and correlating all that was really difficult for the travel agent that we have. But she did a fantastic job. The only problem was she couldn't correlate how the airplanes were. One airplane got into trouble. They had to turn back, and so they didn't arrive when they were supposed to arrive in Hawaii. The rest of us, coming from other areas, all arrived at the right time. And we didn't know what had happened, that airplane had to turn back, and they got into Honolulu late. We picked up our cars that we were picking up after we flew to Kauai and drove to where we were staying. The rain was pouring sheets. We didn't know exactly where it was, so this was a very interesting experience. And one whole plane load, well, not a plane load, but one whole group didn't arrive till the next day. But we finally got together, and it rained, but that was fine because everybody could sleep all that day, and the rest of the time it was wonderful. We seemed to collect the rain because when we started down the Grand Canyon, after that, or before that, I don't remember which came first, it rained so hard the first day and a half that I was just sick because we'd spent so much money to take everybody down the Grand Canyon, and everybody was cold and miserable and being good sports but not having any fun at all. And then it cleared up and we had an absolutely wonderful time.
One of the most wonderful experiences that we've ever had. This picture is taken at Havasu Canyon. This is a picture of our grandchildren that existed at that time. as they were all assembled to greet their parents as they returned.
But I think when the Smart family collects, we kind of collect moisture. Maybe the heavens weep because we're together, I don't know.
In the sesquicentennial of the arrival of the Mormons in Salt Lake Valley, President Hinckley asked every ward and every stake in the church to do a service project. We chose to do a project which is going to have lasting value. We built a park, a small park at the site where the Mormons first camped as they entered the valley on July 22nd, 1847. This is a picture of the monument, part of the monument there, with Stuart Loosely on the right, who was the landscape architect who designed the park and was a great force in getting it built. This is at a time when she and I together published a book on the Parley P. Pratt exploration of southern Utah.
The reason we did this book on Over the Rim is that my great-great-grandfather was in that exploration, and I was looking for material about him when we started reading the journals, and so we had a really good time doing that. Bill added all of the wonderful extra information, and I transcribed the journals. But they talked about, they had a terrible time getting over some very snowy hills. Took them days and hours, and pulling up the oxen, which then pulled up the wagons and so forth. When they got over into the Parowan Valley, where they could see the Parowan Valley, there were some rock ledges that they inscribed their initials on. Many of them did. And a wonderful man from Cedar City, Alva Matheson, knew where those were and took us scrambling up this little hill to see them, and that's what I'm pointing at there.
This is Christmas time at 55 Laurel Street with a Santa Claus that I made based on a pattern that Donna found, showing Santa Claus desperately clinging to the roof while he's trying to keep himself from falling off or trying to climb up. Moving from 55 Laurel Street after 45 years was a wrench, for me at least, but this picture showing the snowfall that the previous winter shows one of the reasons that we were willing to move, that I was willing to move, because there was a lot of shoveling of snow at that place. In 1968, I underwent open heart surgery to correct a birth defect, a septal defect. And I guess not knowing whether I was going to come out of that surgery or not, Donna wanted to have a picture taken of our family. And so this is a picture. I don't know why everybody was so morose at that time in this picture, but whether they were concerned about their father or whether they just didn't want to have their picture taken or what. But this is a picture at that time.
Everybody was mad. That's why they're looking like they're looking. They were mad, and some had been crying, and I think we were all kind of upset, but we're a family that's never liked having our picture taken very well. And the other one, the most recent one, is not an awfully lot better.
This is our latest family portrait, taken in 2002. And you'll see the family there, and we were grown up and happy, although some of us don't look that happy.
They just always do it, but it's not with a great lot of joy that they do it. But when we're having fun together, and it's been a real, we're not posing. When we're not posing formally for a photographer, then they do pretty well. And so the last one is the one that we took when our family gave us for Christmas a family reunion at the Rockin' Ranch. And we got a really pretty good picture of everyone there because everyone was in a good mood and we'd all had a good time, and it was a wonderful gift that our family gave us. They've been giving our whole lives And I hope that in some ways we've been able to give a little bit back. I have in my hands a picture of Eleanor Claire Smith, born November 2nd, 2002, daughter of Rebecca and Madison Smith, our first great-granddaughter. I had the wonderful opportunity of going to Martinez, where they live, Martinez, California, and being with my daughter, my granddaughter, and my great-granddaughter for a couple of hours, and then being with my granddaughter and my great-granddaughter for about 3 days. It was really wonderful to contemplate this beautiful new life that had come into the world, and to think about how lucky she was to have good parents, but how hard it might be to live in the kind of times that she might be faced with. And so I had a lot of prayers in my heart in her behalf. When I left there, I stopped in Reno to see Donna Smart, Bill's stepmother, who is 103 plus 4 months. I can't help thinking what it's like to see a new life, and then one who's lived such a long life, who's struggled through a lot of trials in good spirits and optimism, and who's given so much back. So that was just kind of an interesting juxtaposition, and I'd like to think about that a lot and have the family think about that. When one's born, that person has no idea how long they'll live. But if they should live to be 103, they don't want to have regrets. They want to live the best they can, as cheerfully as they can, as positively as they can, and as courageously as they can. And we have a great family, so I'm sure they'll do that. Don't you think so?
Yeah, absolutely. As this film is made, I'm 80 years old, and Donna soon will be 80 years old.
I'm not ever going to be 80.
But we've lived a long time. We've seen great changes technologically, medically, scientifically. We've seen almost from the time that airplanes really became commercial. Now we're going to the moon and beyond. And so we've seen tremendous, tremendous changes. And to me, you wonder, my goodness, what will another 80 years bring? When you children, or grandchildren, great-grandchildren who might see this, what will the world be like? It seems to me at this point that it might be it's a dangerous world. We have difficulties, and who knows what will happen. But no question there will be tremendous, tremendous changes, and what the world will be like at that time, I can hardly imagine. But with all the changes, there are fundamental things that I hope will always guide your lives. Fundamental things like love of family. We've been so blessed by a family that loves us, and we love them, and they love each other. And that is such a great blessing. We're so grateful for that. And that's a fundamental that I hope will always be true in your lives, no matter what the future will bring. We've been blessed by faith in God, and that's a fundamental that has meant so much to us, and I hope will be a fundamental in your lives. And another fundamental is that happiness comes through service to others. I hope that that'll be true in your lives. Whatever the future brings, I hope you'll find happiness and joy and love. The Lord bless you. The love of my life.
We've had a good one.
Yeah, we have.
Maybe I'll turn 80 if I have to.